Gemini, something you've been circling in conversation for weeks is about to become real this week, and your love life just got a genuinely lucky boost, too. Mars remains in your own sign, still giving you real drive and directness, a continuation of the rare personal window that opened last week and hasn't closed yet. On August 6th, Venus enters Libra, her own ruling sign, landing in your fifth house of romance and self-expression, a favorable, easy placement for love. The same day, the Sun forms a supportive trine to Saturn, connecting your third house of communication to your 11th house of friends and long-term goals, an aspect that specifically favors turning talk into something concrete. Chiron also stations retrograde on August 3rd at 0 degrees Taurus, quietly settling into your 12th house of rest and the subconscious, a much quieter thread than the loud, personal Chiron placement Taurus itself is dealing with this same week. This week reads gentler and more pleasant overall than last week's identity-focused convergence, without losing the personal energy Mars has been giving you since it entered your sign. It's a rare combination where the sky asks less of you internally while still supporting real forward motion externally. Let's go through what all of this actually means for your money, your relationships, and your energy, using the real sky, not generic guesswork. Money and career benefit this week from continued clarity through Mercury in Cancer, still sitting in your second house of money. Financial conversations and decisions should keep feeling more grounded than they did during the recent retrograde fog. And this is a good week to follow through on a plan you clarified last week, rather than starting something entirely new. Since Mercury's clarity here is compounding rather than resetting from scratch, if you set a budget or made a decision last week that you haven't fully acted on yet, this week is better spent completing that thought than generating a fresh one, which is a genuine discipline for a mind that tends to prefer the excitement of a new idea over the follow-through on an old one. Mars, still in your own sign, continues to give you real personal drive if a financial decision needs a decisive push rather than more deliberation. You have the nerve for it this week. The same way you did last week, since Mars hasn't moved on from your sign yet. Use this overlap deliberately, because once Mars eventually shifts signs, this particular combination of financial clarity and personal boldness won't line up again for a wild treat this week. Less like a routine stretch of days, and more like a genuine, time-limited window worth acting inside of rather than observing from a distance. Relationships take a genuinely pleasant turn this week, thanks to Venus's move into Libra on August 6th, landing in your fifth house of romance, creativity, and self-expression. This is a comfortable, favorable placement, Venus, in her own sign, in the part of your chart devoted to pleasure and connection, and it supports both new romantic interest and creative projects that carry an emotional charge. If you're single, this is a good week to actually put yourself somewhere you might meet someone, rather than staying in your usual habit of connecting primarily through words, rather than presence, a shared activity, or a reel. In-person setting will serve you better this week than another long message thread, since Venus in this house genuinely favors being physically present over being clever from a distance. If you're partnered, use this week for something genuinely enjoyable together rather than only practical logistics, since Venus in this placement rewards lightness and shared pleasure over problem solving. Even something small, like trying a new place together or making time for a shared hobby, will land better than usual under this influence. Precisely because the goal this week isn't to accomplish something together, but simply to enjoy something together without an agenda attached. The Sun's trine to Saturn on August 6th adds a different, more structural kind of support, your natural gift for communication. Sun in Leo's third house energy applied through your own sign's ruling planet gets real backing from Saturn in your 11th house of friends and long-term goals. This is a good day to turn a casual conversation with a friend into an actual plan, rather than letting a good idea stay at the talking stage indefinitely, which is a genuine Gemini pattern worth noticing this week specifically. If you and a friend have been circling an idea, a project, a trip, a shared goal, without actually setting a date or a next step, this trine offers real momentum to move from conversation into commitment. Gemini can generate an almost unlimited number of good ideas in a single conversation, and this particular day is less about generating a new one and more about actually locking down one you already have. Trines like this don't last long at full strength, so it's worth using the specific day rather than assuming the ease will still be there a week later. Energy and health this week move more quietly than last week's sharp mental clarity. Since Chiron's retrograde station lands in your 12th house of rest and the subconscious, a house that operates mostly below the surface, this asks for a gentler kind of attention than Mars's directness in your own sign. Notice if dreams feel more vivid than usual, or if a quiet, hard-to-name sadness surfaces without an obvious trigger this week. Chiron here doesn't announce itself the way it would in a more personal house. It works underneath conscious awareness, which for a sign as verbal as yours can be genuinely disorienting, since you're used to being able to name and discuss whatever you're feeling almost as it happens. Gemini tends to process discomfort by talking it through immediately. This particular placement rewards simply sitting with a feeling for a while before turning it into words. Since some of what's surfacing this week may not be fully ready to be explained yet, and rushing to articulate it might flatten something that would otherwise reveal more if left alone a little longer. Physically, Mars in your own sign continues to give you real vitality this week. Use it for movement and activity. But don't be surprised if your usual quick mental pace feels slightly harder to access in quieter moments, since part of your energy is being pulled toward this subtler 12th house process happening in the background, whether or not you're consciously aware of it during the day. There's a shorter note about the broader picture still unfolding. The lunar nodes remain on the Aquarius-Leo axis, with the North Node in your 9th house of beliefs and travel, and the South Node in your 3rd house of everyday communication. Your growth edge over the coming months continues to lie in genuine engagement with bigger ideas and further horizons, rather than staying in the more familiar comfort of quick, surface-level exchange. This is a real stretch for a sign that often finds safety in staying light and versatile, rather than committing to one deeper belief or one longer conversation about something that actually matters. And the discomfort of that stretch is, in itself, a sign the nodes are working correctly, rather than a sign something has gone wrong. This week doesn't bring a new nodal event, but it continues shaping the background of everything else happening right now, and it's worth checking whether last week's version of this insight actually led anywhere, or simply became one more interesting thing you thought about briefly. So here's where this actually leaves you, Gemini, heading into the 2nd week of August. Mars keeps your personal drive strong. Venus in Libra offers real romantic and creative ease if you use it actively rather than staying in your head about it. And Saturn's trine to the Sun rewards turning a good conversation into an actual plan, rather than letting it stay just talk. If there's a single through line this week, it's the difference between naming something and actually doing it. And this particular sky is unusually generous toward whichever one you're willing to follow through on. If this reading resonated with you, hit like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments if the Venus-Libra shift is already showing up for you this week in love or creativity.